Hi there, I'm Philip Ideson, the founder of Art of Procurement. And at Art of Procurement, we help procurement professionals like you plan and deliver change with confidence. Whether it's through the mapping and prioritization of your change journey, securing the subject matter expertise that you need to help you along the way, or assisting you and your team to take action on what they learn, and what's really important is on also what they already know. And of course, a big part of what we do is this weekly podcast where we share strategies and tactics that aim to inspire and help elevate your change journey. I want to thank you for joining me today. Let's go straight into the show. So hi there everybody, welcome to Art of Procurement episode 245 and welcome back to this month in procurement for March of 2019. Crazy it's March already. Kelly Barner is with me again. Kelly, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, and this week, or this month should I say, at least I feel like I have a voice. I remember when we did it last time, I was in the middle of probably feeling sorry for myself from being all stuffy and getting whatever the kids had. So I feel a little bit perkier this month. So
just in time. Next month will be seasonal allergies. So don't get used to us both sounding like ourselves.
Yeah, that's one of the things moving to Florida from Southern California. I have so much hay fever, and when I went to Southern California, just disappeared. Like, I guess the air is so dry. And now I've come back to Florida. They're all rearing their ugly head again.
Yeah, allergies and alligators.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All fun things. So a quick review of the format. You know, we'll have a brief discussion on the pods that we published in Art of Procurement this month. We'll go into just some general Art of Procurement news, and then we have a discussion topic of the month. This month, we're going to talk a little bit more actually about what the art of procurement actually is, because it's something that we've been talking about across social, and I think it's an idea which is starting to pick up a little bit of steam. So we want to just explore that a little bit. I just want to say, though, going forward, one of the things we're exploring with this format is bringing in a subject matter expert for a particular category to come and talk to Kelly and I about what's going on within the market for, it could be anything, depending on the experts that we talk to. But just to try and get some real-time insights in a particular area. So watch for that as we continue to evolve the format that we have with this month in procurement. And then at the end, we'll just give a little bit of insight of some of the interviews that we have coming up on the show. I think that's about it, right, Kelly, today?
I think so, although hold on to your hats for everybody as we get to the end, because I think we have roughly, 30 podcasts for recording in the next however many days. So there's a little bit of something for everybody, regardless of what it is that you're focused on right now. Yeah,
we have a crazy interviewing schedule, which, one of the good things about events, because I'll mention a little bit later all the different events I'm going to be at the next month. I think that I'm going to be packing a suitcase and not really seeing the family much, but it means that we get to do a ton of different interviews. So, and a lot of really good practitioner based interviews, which is the things that I'm always trying to strive for in the show. So we've been busy at work trying to prep for all of those.
Yeah, and they're all different, but they're all really interesting.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the pods that we had this month. And so the first one we had, which was episode 242, was moving up or into procurement with Louis Bastone. Now, I really enjoyed talking to Louis. I think with the show, a lot of things that we do are for, a lot of us who have been in the profession for a long time, we talk about some of the tactics in terms of, obviously, how to elevate our roles. What I really liked about this conversation was that it really provides an insight for folks who are thinking about coming into procurement. And, how can we think about positioning procurement in a way that it makes it attractive to whether it's people on the outside of procurement that we want them to make a move, into procurement from another function, or whether we're trying to recruit them at a graduate level.
And I actually thought one of the things that was so interesting that he brought to it is this, for those of us, Phil, like you and I, who have been in procurement long enough, and we've I feel like we're really starting to push through this sense of chip on our shoulder. We don't have a voice. We want a seat at the table. Nobody likes procurement. We're sort of starting to break away from that and say, hey, you know what? We do have a lot more influence. We do have a lot more opportunity. We can do these incredibly cool things. And it gives us more in common with people that are either making parallel moves into procurement from other functions, or who later in their career are moving into procurement, even from another company, right? Regardless of what their background is. Yeah. And I thought that Lewis did a really good job of not trying to negate the importance of influence, because you have to have influence in order to work interesting projects and have an impact on the top and bottom line. But it doesn't have to be this resentful, hard scrabble fight. You know, he talked about the fact that your influence can actually start small. So you don't have to say, oh, well, I can't influence an entire business unit, so I'm not going to influence anybody. If you can influence 3 people in your building, that's the place to start. And I appreciated how realistic he made it all sound, how achievable and positive it all was from his perspective.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that we sometimes have this mindset that I don't think we appreciate the power of our own choices.
I agree.
And I think what Lewis was really effective in doing is showing that actually you don't need to, if something seems like it's unachievable, just break it down into a number of steps, as you were saying. And actually there's usually a journey and the path for change that you can go on yourself, or you can take the business unit on from an influence perspective. And once you've been beaten up a few times in procurement, maybe you lose some of that perspective. And everything seems a little bit too difficult. I know I hear that a lot. It just seems like it's going to be too hard to do that, so why bother at all? And it just doesn't have to be like that.
No, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but sometimes I think that in the things that we have been conditioned to strive for, things like titles, things like, access to the C-suite, sometimes you get fixated on this thing just because you've been fixated on it. And as so much is changing right now that a lot of times getting a really important title no longer directly correlates to getting more influence. And sometimes you can almost work outside the system and have a tremendous amount of influence and cause a lot of positive change without necessarily having that traditional C-level title.
Yeah, now we talk a lot about seat at the table, or I hear that a lot. It's one of those terms that I know anybody who knows me knows that, I'm ready to throw out the table and the seat at the window whenever I hear it. But I think it's something we still always strive for. I just wonder your view. Do we really need to be that C-level? Should we be striving to be at the exec level, or can we be influence? Can we be impactful by perhaps taking a different route?
I think there's no question that we can, and it's funny. I'll tease ahead because 2 of the conversations that I know are coming up in short-term future podcasts. One is a line that absolutely lines up with what you just said. In talking to John Hansen from Procurement Insights recently, he had said to me, forget a seat at the table. There is no table. Yeah. The table's gone. There is no more table. If you're fixated on that, you're looking in the wrong direction. But I also had an opportunity to speak with Nancy Nickel, who is in the not for resale or indirect spend group at Ahold USA. And she does report. She reports directly to the president. And I had an opportunity to ask her, should we be careful what we wish for? What are the expectations when you get to that point? And she had a fascinating point of view. The expectations are almost terrifying. And this goes back to that idea that we've been fighting for the access, for the title, for the seat at the table for so long. We've sort of stopped thinking about what that really means, because there are some ways that being more visibility and being higher up actually comes with more constraints than being a little smaller, a little nimbler, a little bit more independent, a little bit less insight. I think there's positives and negatives to both of those things.
Now, do you think, based on the pre-interview with Nancy, that you really need to have your ducks in a row, whatever that looks like, before you really are striving for that influence? Or it's just dangerous to suddenly be in that position when you're not necessarily ready for it and you only get one shot. So I'm wondering how we make sure that we're prepared, even if it's not a let's be afraid to talk to them until we've got A, B, and C in place.
Yeah, and it's funny because the thing that really stuck with me that she had said is that making a mistake at that level, quote, doesn't have to be career ending. Right. I mean, if nothing puts it into perspective, that does.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that all of these things, whether it's influence or title, yes, all of those things open doors, but they only open it. They don't get you through. They don't generate results. It's just the beginning. That at the end of the day, we really need to master the fundamentals and do work of substance. Yeah. And that idea was one that actually jumped out at me in the AOP Live podcast, the conversation with Sammeli.
Yeah.
Because when you think about AI, to me, that's sort of one of those, it's like the technology equivalent of influence, right? It's this like unattainable thing. We all want AI, and it's the coolest. We all want the title. We all want the influence. And his point that to me is so critical and is something that I think we can easily overlook is that if you're looking to find a use case for AI, yes, it's extremely cool, emerging technology. But where you should actually look to apply it is in a process or in a business need with the right level of boringness. Mm-hmm. So what he's saying is you're not going to pair up the coolest technology with the most whiz-bang project. The coolest technology actually steps in and fills the gap in how do I accomplish this tactical, transactional type of thing. And in some ways, to me, that's the same kind of idea. You get the influence not by being flashy. You get the influence and potentially the access in the title by doing a really good job every single day, delivering on your word, making a difference in terms of how people work. And I think all of those ideas come together, whether it's talent development, whether it's technology, whether it's process automation. I think at the end of the day, we can't be focused on the title or the influence. What we really need to do is just focus on the work, and the rest of it will follow.
Yeah, and it's, we talk about AI, and it's almost like we feel like we have this, and I use new in air quotes because I think a lot of folks who have been in the AI industry will say that the technology is actually nothing new. We're just finding new ways to use it, and perhaps we're using ways that are faster to use it, which is making it commercial. But we think that when we have this technology that we have to do something crazy with it to generate a completely different outcome than what we had before, because that's its promise, as opposed to just using it. You said boring. I know that's what Sammeli said in the AOP Live as well. Just something you do today, just apply AI to that as a place to start, proving out the use case. One of the things that came up to me as well in that conversation that I really liked was to think of AI not necessarily as a machine, but I think a collaboration partner was what he talked about. So it's almost like it has a persona of its own, that AI isn't just something that's I don't know. I don't know what the word is. It's this just a computer in a box. It's not a computer in a box, but think of it as just almost like a person within your team, or certainly a persona within your team, because then that helps you have a better understanding of how it can help you and connect with the other things that the other people in your team are doing.
But then let me ask you this, because we talk about capability development a lot at AOP. So if we're thinking about AI as a collaborative partner, as a certain profile on the team with a skill set, what are the capabilities or the level of understanding that those of us in procurement have to develop in order to work well with this new colleague? How do we leverage this new colleague effectively?
Yeah, that's really interesting. The first thing that comes to mind is kind of understand how it works. So what is it? How does it think? Again, saying it as if AI was a person. But I think understanding how it thinks is a really good way to understand how you can interact with it, and how you can start figuring out how you best use it. Because I think that it goes back to the black box. We don't necessarily understand what AI means, other than it's a technology that happens to do some wonderful things that make our lives easier. But do we really know what AI is? Because, AI is, I think Sammeli said as well in the conversation, AI is just like a high-level term, and within that there are a number of different technologies, such as machine learning. So it's drilling down to understand what you really mean by AI, and what that colleague who is AI actually does is a great first step.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because as we start to take that perspective on it, I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing magical about AI. It's still doing something that it's been trained to do, either through data sets or practice, or running a script and refining and reprocessing. And in the most traditional sense, that's what we learned from David Loseby in the conversation about behavioral economics, where he talked about you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. Now, he said it much fancier than that. He talked about it as cognitive frames and bounded rationality. Yeah. But for the rest of us, I mean, that's basically what it means. You don't know what you don't know. And so it is a human being programming the AI based on what they know and have experienced. So there are still limits in terms of what AI can accomplish, and those are tied to our own knowledge and capabilities.
Yeah, it's only as good as we program it.
Exactly.
At the end of the day. And our own biases, which actually go into the programming of the bot or the machine algorithm, or whatever it may be, whatever use case the AI takes up.
Absolutely. And that's the tricky part. That's sort of the gray piece that falls in between. And you would think, and I'm speaking based on, my own experience, both as a, boots in the trenches person implementing procurement technology, and also helping other companies implement technology. Yeah. You would think by now that enough of us would have been through the process of going, oh yeah, we're not as strategic in our spend management or our spend analysis as we could be. I know, let's implement technology. Mm-hmm. That will fix it. Never fixes it. And AI is no different, and blockchain is no different. You can call it whatever you want. You can't slap technology on something suboptimal and automatically get a better result.
Yeah, it's only a piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
It is.
It's actually a great, I think, segue into, and what we'll do is I'll come back in a few minutes because I want to keep on this train of conversation. So I'll come back to some of the other things that we have going on from a news perspective. But the thing we wanted to talk about this week was around, as an article in the Harvard Business Review that basically is talking about the fact that digital transformation isn't about the technology. And I think that's kind of the point that you're making there, is that we've all seen these implementations of, whether it's suites or best of breed or whatever it is, and there's lots of fanciful ROI that's sold to get the deal to do that. And there's a heck of a lot of money and time invested over the course of, a year implementation in some cases. You get the technology in place, nothing changes, nothing happens. And I think that's something that, as I see more and more companies looking at the technology roadmaps, like I see that more than I've seen ever before right now.
Okay.
It's something to keep at the forefront of the imagination, that it's not necessarily about how wonderful the technology is, but it's how you change your organization to take advantage of the outputs that technology drives, and that enables that technology to take better inputs than perhaps what you have today.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because that HBR article talks about 4 lessons. No, I'm sorry, it's more than 4. It's 5 lessons for how to have a successful digital transformation. And I'm not even kidding. The very first sentence of the very first lesson, I underlined it twice, and I wrote in the margin, following standard procurement operating procedure will fix this. So the very first sentence is, leaders who aim to enhance organizational performance through the use of digital technologies often have a specific tool in mind. Mm-hmm. This is Procurement 101. You cannot pick a solution or a provider and then back into your specs and requirements. You have to look at the strategy, decide what your needs are, and then look at the broadest pool of qualified options possible to pick who it is you're going to work with going forward. And if nothing else, this proves that procurement's expertise is absolutely critical, regardless of what a company is buying or doing or, using from a services perspective. Because I read that short paragraph as a procurement pro, I have been through this so many times. I can't believe it's still HBR level thought leadership to say, don't pick your partner and then back into the specs.
Yeah. Yeah. And it happens so often, doesn't it?
It happens all the time.
Yeah. And then once you have done that, it's not the re-engineering of the business around that technology either. So it's one thing that if you find yourself in that position, then you need to make sure that you're still engineering the business, the processes, the framework, the policies, whatever it is around it to take advantage of it, so that is you're creating the situation for the investment in that technology to be amplified. As opposed to just dropping it into what you already have and just hoping that it's going to make things a little bit faster or a little bit more effective, or all of a sudden the insights are going to be far superior even though you're calling on the same data sets that you had before.
Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know if you would agree with this. You're asking a group of people to digitally transform, or really, really do something different for the company. Mm-hmm. And step one, you close your mind by picking who you're going to work with.
Right.
That to me is the most textbook example of an unintended bias. And it doesn't matter if you're selecting a digital transformation partner or you're programming AI or you're coming up with a sourcing strategy. The sooner you close your mind, the more you cap your results.
And so I think that brings us to what it actually is the art of procurement, because we've talked about the science. The science to me is the processes and the technology. But as we just have talked about, a lot of times you're finding that you put the technology in place or you put a pretty stringent process in place. It doesn't necessarily change the results. And to me, the art is some of the things we talked about there. It's amplifying the science and the technology through enabling your teams to do different things, different things that they could have done without this technology. It's, helping to perhaps create frameworks that are really flexible in their approach. So you're not still telling people, hey, for every single thing that you buy, this is the 7-step process or the 5-step process or the 6-step process that you got to go through. It's affording a lot of flexibility in process. It's enabling creativity amongst your teams. Those are the soft skills that we talked about. Those are the soft skills that David Loseby talked about in his interview. It's obviously really a lot harder to do into practice than it is to just talk about it itself. But that's how we create, in my mind, a competitive advantage from a procurement team, is going beyond, because science, I think of science as something that if you can't patent the science, everybody can copy it.
Right. And in a way, if you can't repeat it, it's not science.
Yeah. Whereas the art is something that is extremely hard to replicate based on your unique culture. Why would you want to replicate it? Because every company is different. Right. So what works for one company might not work for the other. But it's how you then basically bring together your company culture, bring together the science and the technology and the process you've got. So you're actually creating an environment where you're delivering value that your business wants rather than just what you think procurement should be doing. That's where we really level the game. And I think we have a bit of a glass ceiling sometimes to break through when we get to that level of what are we actually here for as a procurement team.
But I think too, it's the difference between create in the sense of make, right? I can create a map. I can create a bookshelf. On a really good day, I can create cookies without burning them. But to actually be creative, I mean, it's exhausting. And even some of the things, although it's not direct procurement, but some of the things that we have pulled together, whether it be web content or approaches to interviews or social media strategy, where do you find that the creativity is best applied? Because not all situations lend themselves to being creative. And how do you find the energy to maintain sort of a creative approach?
Yeah. The energy can be difficult, right? When you have people, not everybody shares in the same perspective that you do, and they're kind of striving to do something differently. I'd say that a lot of that depends on where you focus that energy. we were having a conversation a couple of days ago, just off record, like off the mic, and we talked about the reverse of tail spend. You know, this idea that when we always look at the 80-20 Pareto, and 80% of it is really the stuff that we think lends itself to being automated or having self-service, guided buying. 20% is the stuff that we're going to be buying or helping our companies assess whether we should be buying or making in that space. That's what's going to drive the competitive advantage of the business. So we really, I think, when it comes to creativity, we need to be focusing on those areas that are going to be the most impactful. And, often at that end, at the 20%, the stuff that is really the most important things to the business, one, it's areas that we have traditionally had more difficulty, I think, getting in front of from a procurement perspective. But I also think that's because we come to that conversation with a process first focus. And so when those are the people within the organization who are trying to solve problems, who actually have, a blank sheet of paper and a whiteboarding and brainstorming how they can solve problems. Those are the kind of places where we need to be creative. The 80%, I think creativity runs to how do we bring creativity in a business model, for example. But it's not the whiteboarding, everything in the open. Let's try and think of a different way to approach how we may buy this product or service. And you'll have more luck because that's where you're going to be finding people who think like you.
Well, and even finding people who don't, because when I think about the personas that we've defined within AOP Nudge, we talk about certainly the catalyst, but the pragmatist, the technician, the builder, the architect, everybody has their own way of being creative. So even, in a team of two here, you and I are creative in very different ways. I listen to news stories and watch the TV, and I watch the, Chiron scrolling by on the bottom, and I collect words. And so my creativity is sitting in the, 4 quiet minutes I have a day thinking about what's a really great phrase that captures this idea. So for me, a new way to say something or a way to capture an idea in words so that everyone understands it immediately, that's my creative challenge. Whereas you're more visual, right? Spatially, how do I represent these ideas? What should this look like when we show it to people? So where I'm trying to be creative and in a way do outreach and connect with people through words, you're looking at a slide or some other kind of asset and thinking, what is someone going to feel when they see this? And does the way I've organized the information help people take it in and connect with it? So it really is a huge opportunity for collaboration because you need all of that.
Right. I think that the other thing that when we think about creativity, an area of how we can apply that from a procurement perspective is in the area of continuous improvement. So it's an area, again, that, when you think of a traditional procurement process, you've done your sourcing, everything's great, you're running into supplier management. Then we go to, what does continuous improvement look like? What does innovation look like? I actually think that's something that we should be embedding more across the entire value chain. Not just thinking about continuous improvement and innovation as something that stands alone once everything is running perfectly. It's something that even before we have implemented and I'm saying this from a technology perspective just because I think this is in the context of digital transformation, before we've implemented one thing, we should already be thinking about, how are we going to innovate on this the next time through? Because that may actually impact how we implement the first time. And how we message that implementation the first time, because we often think of it as once something is implemented, that's it, we're good, we're done, we don't need to worry about it. Like, thanks, I've finished that implementation that took me 2 years, as opposed to, okay, that's the first step. How are we going to make this better? Yeah.
And part of it is we don't want it to look like either the implementation wasn't able to be completed or we didn't see it all the way through to the end. We just sort of let it go along on its own. But you never really should be done if you're doing it right.
Yeah, I think it's in the messaging and in the change management that this is I always encourage folks to think of it as being an iterative journey as opposed to a big bang. Because even if it is a big bang in terms of technology launch, that is still the beginning of your next journey. And it just helps people, I think, from a mindset perspective, that not to start just relaxing once the tech implementation is done and that everything is going to be okay now, because that's really just the first piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, the minute you start thinking everything is okay, it's officially time to worry.
Right.
But sometimes, I mean, just like getting the influence or the title that we were talking about earlier, sometimes you can almost try to create this artificially perfect situation, and it actually doesn't deliver what you thought it was going to.
Right.
And I don't know if everybody does. I follow you as Phil on Twitter, as well as following you as Art of Procurement.
I'm sorry.
If you want everything really entertaining, follow Phil on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
As an American, I don't follow, we call it soccer, you call it football. I don't follow it, so I don't get into the details. No idea most of the time what you're writing about, but you're clearly very enthusiastic about it.
It's an emotional roller coaster, of which has been, the last 18 months have been a heck of a lot more downs than ups. But football is very cyclical. So we've had our highs, we're now enjoying, for the want of the better word, a lot of lows, and you see that exhibited through my Twitter account.
But and you recently, I think I caught a tweet that went by, and it was actually one that I understood because I felt like it applied to the world of procurement, where you talked about never underestimate what a B team can do if they're all committed and enthusiastic, and don't ever assume that a group of A-teamers is just going to deliver. I think that's an idea that absolutely crosses domains. Yeah,
I think so. The context for that, and I think that it does cross into the business world too, is from a sporting perspective, from my football team, we've invested a lot of money in a lot of expensive players who have a lot of talent, but they just haven't gelled. They don't work well together, and frankly, they don't seem like they care about what the overall goal is. And on the flip side, I talked about football being cyclical. Where we've had some really strong successes the last few years has not been with a team of A players; it's been with a team of B players, perhaps even some C players, who just they weren't paid the big bucks particularly, but they all cared. We had somebody, a manager, obviously in the context of business, a team leader or a director or whoever that may be, who's able to create an environment and a safe space where people weren't afraid of taking risks, but that they all just wanted it for each other. And so they were all playing for the collective rather than playing for the individual.
And that's very hard to purposefully create, to set out and say, okay, I'm going to, pay everybody a little bit less. Well, that's not the way to accomplish it, right? It's not just about the dollars. And it's not just about, okay, I'm going to take a bunch of people that are going to be just so glad to be placed on a team that then they're going to all come together and win. Well, that doesn't really work.
No, but, when I think about the differences in approaches, where the successes have come from with having a really strong B team is because the focus in the hiring process is placed on culture and, not necessarily personal ethics, but, connection and relation. It's all about relational kind of things. And what's important to you as an individual. So it's kind of character-based hiring. Obviously, skill is a big part of it, talent, experience, but it's not that alone. And so you think about hiring somebody that's talent on its talents alone, and sometimes we get a little bit blown away that we think that because they check all the boxes, that will make up for perhaps any character flaws, where actually it's the reverse. You'd rather take some of the talent away, but with a really strong character.
Yeah, and it's that additional factor that is so hard to capture, and whether it's the balancing the art and science of procurement, or whether it's making sure that these biases stay out of either how we run a digital transformation or how we program AI or how we recruit and bring together a team, there's always going to be that additional element that's just that much harder to capture. But at the end of the day is actually what makes all the difference in terms of total value potential or competitive advantage. It's why you can't just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to make my list of tasks to follow to have a successful company, because you have to have some kind of inner compass and a little bit of luck to navigate through the complexity.
Yeah, we're working actually behind the scenes on a assessment program, and assessment like self-assessment or capability assessment, thinking of how that plugs into hiring and connects with hiring. And one of the things that I think is will be a big part of this is that when we're trying to hire, and this goes to the character as well, but when we're hiring, we don't necessarily take a look at what are the skills of the role, what are the skills of the individual, which of the skills that are necessary for the role for you to be successful, or that we believe you to be successful in the role, how hard are they actually to acquire? Because as an example, some of the procurement fundamental skills that we see as being like, it's sacrosanct, this person has to have those, are they actually that difficult to teach? And the answer probably is not as hard to teach as we may like to think sometimes. On the flip side, you have somebody who has super relational skills, who's just really good at building consensus, but they may not have those technical procurement skills. Is it actually going to be an easier journey for them to learn procurement than to teach those skills to somebody who has a procurement skill set, a procurement background?
And I do think, because everything is a slow shift, we've been moving for a long time towards this idea that if you have someone with exceptional relational skills, they can be taught how to source, how to manage suppliers, how to, know about a specific category or industry, that's a balance. And I think we're moving there. I think involving someone's interpersonal skills is definitely part of the considerations when we're recruiting. But I feel like where there's been bigger movement is a lack of tolerance for people without interpersonal skills. That it used to be that if you could really nail this process, if you really knew that category, people would be willing to put up with a difficult personality or an abrasive nature or something like that. And I feel like at least things have moved far enough that even if you're not, the life of the party and, lightning bolt through networking, you can't be abrasive. You have to at least be in the middle. And then we can either help you advance your technical skills, or we can help you start to emphasize interpersonal skills, but you can't come to the table without any good interpersonal skills, because procurement just doesn't need that anymore. And we've recognized that the damage done by poor interactions is much harder to fix than even a mistake made in the sourcing process.
So you mentioned networking there, and that's a great entry into some of the places that we're going to be this month. I talked at the very beginning about the fact I'm going to be living in a suitcase, and I think that's going to be the case. But I know that a number of listeners are also going to be at some of these same events. So if you are going to be on the road taking in a procurement conference or two over the next 5 or 6 weeks, just come and say hello. I'd love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM in the app. We can be the two people in the app that use the conference app.
Makes it easier to find each other that way.
Yeah, right. Or maybe I'll even try that LinkedIn feature where you can find people who are around you. I've never done that before.
There you go.
It feels kind of creepy to me.
It's either that or you have to wear a very strange hat.
Yeah, well, I do have some art of procurement gear, so I don't think anyone will miss me. Yeah.
There you go.
Hot off the press, I guess. We have some polo shirts and a hoodie, so people will be able to come and find me. That's for sure.
Big foam fingers.
And that's next.
Art of procurement is number one. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably a bit more subtle than that. But
that's why I'm not in charge of the collateral.
Yeah. So I'm going to be at ProcureCon as this podcast goes out on Monday. So today, if you're listening to it the day it's been published, I'll be at ProcureCon this week in Florida. Next week I'll be at AOP Live. I'm getting my AOP Lives and my Ariba Lives mixed up. I will be at Ariba Live, which is going to be the 2nd and 3rd of April in Austin in Texas. And then I will be at iValua Now and their event in Paris, which is, I think, the 10th to the 12th of August. Then back to the States, and we have the SIG Spring Summit, and that's going to be April the 15th and 16th, I think it is. So if you're going to any one of those events, please come and just say hello, and it would just be great to meet you face-to-face, put a face to the name, and just a great opportunity to network.
And SIG is the 16th and 17th.
16th and 17th, okay.
But Phil won't be doing much on the 15th. If you want to get there and meet with him a whole day, he's going to be there by himself in the conference space for an entire day. So great opportunity to hook up with Phil.
As all the people I'm supposed to be meeting with in meetings will probably be wondering where I am then that day. But,
on the 17th after you've gone home.
Yeah, right. So hopefully you're going to be at one of those events and could just come and say hi. The other things that we'll have is we do have 2 AOP live sessions. This is where I was getting mixed up a minute ago. So we had our first one in February, which we actually talked about with the session we had with Sammeli from Sievo. We have 2 coming up in April. One is April the 7th, and the other one, we're just finalizing the date. It's probably going to be the 23rd or the 24th of April. The first one is with Infosys, and the second one is with Una. So what I just recommend is keep an eye on the Art of Procurement. You'll be able to find out a little bit more about those. We'll be starting to advertise and promote them in the next few days. And also we'll be sending out a note to our email subscription list. So if you're not on our list, now is a perfect chance to go and sign up and subscribe, and we can let you know about those webinars when we have them finally scheduled. That is at procurement.com/subscribe. So if you do want to join the list, the email list, then that's where the best place to go. So about time to wrap up. Kelly, I just wonder if you had any closing thoughts.
Yeah, so I know we mentioned that we have a lot of podcasts coming up, and some, in fact, in addition to the ones that we've already kind of teased. We have a great conversation coming up with a practitioner named Andy Atkins. Some of you may have read the article he wrote for IACCM on fintech and risk, so financial technologies, working capital, that kind of thing, supply chain finance. Really, really interesting, and it's a great conversation. We're also going to circle back and talk to Ian McKenna from Sourcing Solved, get kind of a different look on talent and recruiting than we've had in some of the recent conversations. And then I guess maybe to interject an air of mystery, we have a couple of really interesting executives that are going through an approval process internally. So it's a little bit of a race to see who gets the sign off first and lands the final spot in April. But either way, it will be a thought-leading executive from a practitioner's perspective, giving us a unique point of view on some of the latest topics within procurement.
Yeah, we've got lots to come. So all these events we're going at, I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be recording shows. So I think we're going to have probably 15 or so recorded. And
face-to-face, which is nice. That gives I remember last year some of the ones you had waterfalls and construction in the background, maybe some birds. Were there birds at one of them?
There were birds in one of them. One of them, we were set up right next to the barista table.
Oh, that's fun. Events. Yeah, that steam sound, the steaming milk sound.
All the way through the event, all you heard was people banging cups of, I guess, I don't know the technical term, but whatever the pot of coffee is, as they're working the barista machine. We had one where they were, I guess, putting some technology in the hallway where we were recording and needed to put parcel tape over all the wires. And so all the way through the event, all you heard was, all the way through the podcast, all you heard was parcel tape noise.
And I'll translate. I think that means duct tape, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess I didn't know what to use. Like I'd say sellotape, but I guess that's Scotch tape. But it was a little bit, it's like the stuff that, Amazon uses to tape its boxes together.
Yeah, it's loud, so every yank gets you a really serious sound. Yeah, not silent taping.
Yeah, so, rest assured we'll find somewhere as noisy as possible. No, I think we have a room for most of those as one of our lessons learned. So hopefully you won't be able to tell, but it'd be great for us to do them face to face, because I always find those conversations just a lot more dynamic because it's just eye contact. Makes such a difference.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, on that note, Kelly, I want to thank you for joining me this month.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and same again next month. And,
Absolutely.
Until then, I'll have a few more air miles in the bank by then.
Are you still looking for someone to stop by your house and feed the alligators while you're away? Or
we've been hearing that's one of the welcome to Florida things. We live right next to a swamp, and so we've been hearing the alligators in the evening. So it's giving me a bit of the heebie-jeebies. So yeah, if you can just come and shoo them away, I think that's all we really need.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Scare them away with snakes. They can all leave together.
Yeah. I don't even know. I think the snakes scare me more than the alligators. So maybe the alligators go and take care of the snakes for me. Everything.
There you go. Good. You'll have to give us an update at the end of next month. What's the snake and alligator count at the end of April?
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, again, Kelly, thank you, and we'll be back next month. Hi there. I want to thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. You can check out all of our back catalogue at artofprocurement.com/podcast. where you can also subscribe to our newsletter to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's show, I'd love if you would tell a peer, or perhaps go and rate and review by going to artofprocurement.com/review. Word of mouth really is the best way to help the podcast grow, and if you're able to do either one of those things, I would truly appreciate it.